just waiting for the Big O. There we go. Big O is live now as well. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having an amazing day today. And yeah, I had a nice early start to the day. Got a couple of really good things done. You can see the camera at the back here. I did a quick recording this morning. So it is really interesting how, and I'm just going to pin myself quickly and then we'll keep going. There we go. It is amazing how this morning we were talking about in my group, The Vibe, where I do lots of really interesting things and we do some personal development, and it's a great place to get some support and really start the day off well. Anyhow, so we were in The Vibe this morning and we were talking about the fact that there are 86,400 seconds in the day. And that is really interesting because each one of those is an opportunity to make some changes to get to the outcome that you want, rather than keep doing what you might be doing, which isn't getting you to your goals. So it is really interesting. And good morning, Eric and Sports Talk on Big O Live, which is really exciting. And Sports Talk saying hi. And Eric giving us a love heart. So thank you for that. Now let's get into the reading, because I'm sure you all have other things to do as well. But 15 minutes of reading is really amazing for increasing our ability to think, to be able to be more critical in our thinking, to be able to relax ourselves, to be able to increase our knowledge and have something to implement throughout the day. Now, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the book that we were going to read, but I only have the Chinese copy still. Lockdown is coming to an end in Sydney very, very soon. So that is also very exciting. So we're going to be reading. And hello, Neil and YDD leaving a love heart as well. So we're going to say a quick hello to everybody and thank you for all of those. So we are reading The Art of Thinking Clearly. It is so important to be able to think clearly. So it's a really great book. We're up to chapter 37. We are really blasting through this. So the theme in The Vibe that I do every morning, where we do exercise together, personal development, or we support each other, we give each other energy throughout the morning. We're talking about consistency this week. So consistency is so important. And doing this video, doing this reading every single morning at 8 a.m. Sydney time is really good for the consistency, and it really has a knock-on effect on everything else throughout my day, and it helps me to get really good on my goals. So if you want to join, send me a message. You can see the replay of this recording on YouTube. The YouTube channel is The Passive Cashflow Club, because I'm all about passive cash flow, and I love finance, and I love all sorts of different things, psychology, and the list just goes on and on and on. But let's get into, now that we are still consistent, The Art of Thinking Clearly, very important. Let's do chapter 37, why you shouldn't believe in the stork, like the stork that brings the babies. False causality is going to be an interesting chapter. Let's unpack it and see what we come up with, and I'll share my ideas and commentary with you. For the inhabitants of the Hebrides, which is an island chain north of Scotland, head lice were a part of life. This makes me itchy on the head immediately. If the lice left their host, he became sick and feverish. Therefore, to dispel the fever, sick people had lice put in their hair intentionally. What an interesting way of doing it. There was a method to their madness. As soon as the lice had settled in again, the patient improved. How bizarre. In one city, a study revealed that in each blaze, the more firefighters called out to fight in, the greater the fire damage. This chapter is getting weird. The mayor imposed an immediately hiring fees and cut the firefighting budget. Both stories come from German physics professors Hans-Peter Beck-Bornhold and Hans-Hermann Duben. In their book, unfortunately there is no English version, they illustrate the muddling of cause and effect. If the lice leave the invalid, it is because he has a fever and they simply get hot feet. When the fever breaks, they return. And the bigger the blaze, the more firefighters were called out. Not, of course, vice versa. We may smirk at these stories, but false causality leads us astray practically every day. Practically every day. Consider the headline, employee motivation leads to higher corporate profits. Does it? I just took a second to think about that, and hopefully you were too. Employee motivation leads to higher corporate profits. Maybe people are simply more motivated because the company is doing well rather than the actual incentives. It's always interesting how when we look at World War II and how it started and why it started. And yesterday we were talking about the stock market and how companies are up or down, and what the actual reasons are as opposed to what they might say on the news. It is really fascinating. Another headline touts that the more women on a corporate board, the more profitable the firm is. But is that really how it works? It could be, because women definitely do have better business brains than men. And yet we fill our boards generally with more men because we think that men are going to get better results. We are so good at breaking the rules and not following a system. Once a consistent system has been created, we men just go off and say, we can do better than the system. We always like to experiment with new things. Or do highly profitable firms simply tend to recruit more women to their boards? Business book authors and consultants often operate with similar false or at least fuzzy causalities. In the 90s, there was no one holier than the then head of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan. His obscure remarks gave monetary policy the aura of a secret science that kept the country on the secure path of prosperity. Alan Greenspan, I always found that he just had a simple way of explaining things. And so because people understood it, they treated him like a god. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he was a god or that he knew everything or that he was always right. And I suppose the financial crash of 2008 probably proved that to a certain degree. He was just really good at explaining things that people understood, so they loved him, regardless of whether he was right or wrong. Politicians, journalists, and business leaders idolize Greenspan. Today, we know that these commentators fell victim to false causality. America's symbiosis with China, the globe's low-cost producer and eager buyer of US debt, played a much more important role. And there's the question again. Was that really what was happening? I find it so interesting. In other words, Greenspan was simply lucky that the economy did so well during his tenure. That's another interesting thing. When a new politician comes in and unemployment goes up, unemployment goes down and the economy gets better and the stock market goes up, the politician will say, it is because I was elected that this has happened, especially the president of the United States, for example. But you have to realize that the economy has a bit of a knock-on effect, and it takes a bit of a time for what you implement to actually show up in the market. And what that means is that, let's say it takes 2 to 3 years for a policy to actually take effect before it starts showing up as a result in the economy. It means that when somebody comes into power and within the first year, things start ticking up, it's usually the politician before's policies that actually created that, not the person that's just been elected. But our brains seem to think that, oh, this president's being elected, so it's their policies that have actually created this. Not necessarily. And sometimes they keep some of the things from their predecessors as well. And that's actually what's caused the uptick, not the new policies that they've implemented. Oh, we're going deep today. We're going deep. We're going deep. A further example, scientists found that long periods in the hospital affected patients adversely. This was music to health insurers' ears. They want to get rid of patients out of hospitals as quickly as possible. They, of course, are keen to make stays as brief as possible. And interestingly, I used to be linked into that system a little bit. My ex was in hospital a lot, and I would know when she was well and when she wasn't well. So she had a mental health disorder, and I would know when she was well and when she wasn't well. And she would be allowed out of hospital, and I'd say, no, it's too early. They'd say, no, she's answered all the questions correctly. And I knew that she memorized the answer to the questions to be able to be let out of hospital. And I'd say, no, she's not ready. They'd let her out because they wanted to get everybody out of the hospital as quickly as possible. But obviously it wasn't the right time. And she'd come home and she would repeat the behavior and she'd end up back in hospital. And I'd say, look, I told you she wasn't ready for it. And then the next cycle, the same thing would happen. She would be let out too early again. It just continued over and over again. But clearly, patients who are discharged immediately after immediately are healthier than those who must stay on for treatment. This hardly makes long stays detrimental. Or take this headline. Fact, women who use shampoo XYZ every day have stronger hair. Though the context can be substantiated scientifically, this statement says very little, least of all that the shampoo makes your hair stronger. It might simply be the other way around. Women with stronger hair tend to use shampoo X, Y, and Z. And perhaps that's because it says, especially for thick hair on the bottle. Or it could just be that people with healthier hair just wash their hair or don't wash their hair, or whatever it is that it might be. Recently, I read that students get better grades at school if their homes contain a lot of books. This study was surely a shot in the arm for booksellers, but it is another fine example of false causality. The simple truth is that educated parents tend to value their children's education more than uneducated ones. Plus, educated parents often have more books at home. In short, a dust-covered copy of War and Peace alone isn't going to influence anyone's grades. What counts is parents' education levels as well as their genes. The best example of false causality was the supposed relationship between the birth rate and the numbers of stork pairs in Germany. Both were in decline. And if you plot them on a graph, the two lines of development from 1965 to 1987 appear almost identical. Does this mean that the stork actually does bring babies? Obviously not, since this was a purely coincidental correlation. So, birth rates were going, let's have a look, both were in decline. So number of storks was going down in Germany, and also birth rates were going down, which is a very funny coincidence because obviously people used to say that the stork brings the baby. So number of storks was going down and birth rates were going down in Germany. Obviously they have nothing to do with each other because we're all adults here. We all know where babies come from, right? And how they're delivered. So in conclusion, correlation is not causality, and this is so important to remember. Take a closer look at linked events. I am very highly critical of linked events. If people say this was caused by that, I have a very close look at it. And I know that very often we just make these things up because we want to have that story. We want to be able to see reasons for why things happen. And there doesn't need to be a reason, it just happens. And we can do some research and we can do our best to be in the right place at the right time, but we can't know what really caused what, even though as humans we just feel the need to know these things. Sometimes what is presented as the cause turns out to be the effect, and vice versa. And sometimes there is no link at all, just like with the storks and the babies. Okay, so I think I've already shared a lot on that one because we went deep into this one. It was a good chapter. So I hope you enjoyed that. Leave a comment. So if you're on Bigo, come and join me on the Passive Cashflow Club on YouTube, and you can watch the replay. You can leave a comment. You can share your thoughts. You can also leave it live, obviously. I don't always manage to see them because I'm reading. If you're on Zoom, feel free to leave a comment in the chat, or you can also watch the replay. And we will start doing some more fun things around all of these things as well. I am really feeling it with these readings at the moment, and it's amazing having you here. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be reading chapter 38. Everyone is beautiful at the top. At the top? Are we talking like CEOs and everybody like that? We'll have to see, I suppose. Tomorrow we're talking about the halo effect. Halo effect. That will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, this has been Reading with Menno. I hope you've enjoyed. Make sure you go out and turn your day into a masterpiece after this. You have some new knowledge, some things that you can implement. And yeah, I'll see you all. Not tomorrow. Wait, today's Friday. I always forget what day it is. I'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you all soon.